The views and opinions expressed in this program do not necessarily represent those of Natural Bridges Media or KSQD's staff, volunteers, or underwriters.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Talk of the Bay on Thursday, July 13th. I am your host for today, Ami Chen Mills, and we have a very exciting and action-packed show for you today. I'm calling it Could It Happen Here? This is about Moms for Liberty and the tentacles of right-wing funding across the nation, even sneaking into blue states and blue school districts and blue counties across California. We have two experts with us on this topic today, Allie Collins and Christina Johnson. Hello, are you there?
Hi, thank you so much for inviting us.
Christina is maybe on hold. I'm just going to go ahead and introduce both of these women who are on our show now. Christina Johnson, who will be joining us, I believe, in a second, is a single mother of three. Two of her children are members of the LGBTQIA community. She's an Afro-Latina, Haitian, Dominican, Cuban, Bajan, and
Bajan, yes.
Bajan. I was wondering how to pronounce that. And
yes,
Black.
Yes, from Barbados, like Rihanna.
Okay, cool. And there you are. Thank goodness you've joined us. And Christina moved. Hi. And Christina moved to Temecula, California in the Inland Empire in 2012 for the schools and community. Quote, she says, so my kids could have the roots that I did not have growing up, unquote. She is passionate about raising awareness regarding the extremist takeover of our public schools, and especially as someone who grew up actually in an aggressive conservative religion. And she knows, she says, how deep that rabbit hole can go. Christina is on TikTok as the Empress CJJ. Thank you for joining us, Christina.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Allie Collins is an educator and parent organizer with over 25 years experience advocating for education equity for historically marginalized students. She holds a master's in education from San Francisco State University and a bachelor's in acting from Tisch School of the Arts at New York University. She has authored curriculum used by thousands of school districts nationwide to help first-generation students access college and has consulted with Bay Area school districts to implement anti-bullying programs and remove barriers to college access. She served on the San Francisco School Board, where she authored several unanimous resolutions, which include removing police from schools, ensuring all students, not just affluent students, have access to arts and music programs, and requiring the district to acknowledge Native American land and history. Her story has been featured in a new play, The Conductor, by Ishmael Reed, appearing live off-Broadway in March 2023. She recently launched a Just Talks podcast exposing and explaining the right-wing ecosystem behind attacks on social justice education. She's also on TikTok, on Medium, and we'll get to her website at the end of the show. So we're going to start with you, Allie. A lot of people actually in our area, which is the Santa Cruz and Monterey Bay area, now all throughout the Central Coast for KSQD, have heard about the San Francisco recalls. And I stumbled across you on TikTok, and that was where I had heard about the recalls too, and I had a certain mindset about them. And the mindset was, oh, people got too far left in San Francisco and they did these crazy things. And so they were recalled. And that was sort of what I heard from NPR. And when I found you speaking about not just the recall, but also right-wing activities across the United States, I learned different things. So what I wanted to ask you was, and I know there are some certain things that I can bring up, but how do you see that recall in terms of what happened to you? I know that one of the biggest complaints during the recall was that the school board was not focusing on reopening the schools. That was a sentiment even echoed by the mayor, London Breed, at the time. But when I've talked to you in person, you have told me differently. Can you talk about how you saw that whole thing starting?
I think I'm an educator by trade. I've always been involved in supporting Black, Latinx, low-income, and immigrant families access college. Those are things that I've been focused on. And living in San Francisco, we've always, as a city, promoted very progressive policies since, long before I was on the board. What we saw after the pandemic, and I think this is becoming more and more visible, as we see these school board conflicts happen across the country, is it's very different right now than it has ever been in terms of just the politicization of schools, school districts, curriculum, things like that. And I don't think we were prepared, me and my, and I don't think many school board members were either, with the political infrastructure that has been developed in order to use school board politics as a battlefield for political takeover. And so in San Francisco, my colleague Gabriela Lopez and I, all of us were very concerned about getting schools open safely. As many of our colleagues were across the country, schools were, struggling with, at the time, we didn't have vaccines for teachers. We were struggling to get laptops to students who didn't have them. And it was amazing to me to just watch news stories blow up about stuff that was not happening in our city. So, and so what I've learned since is that there's this right-wing media ecosystem that is very good at pushing out narratives. But, whether you agree or disagree with renaming, and I do believe that schools that are named after people who've enslaved others, or, I believe that we should be renaming those schools. But when we took over, we were so committed, we basically put that work on pause. Gabriella and I were both, she was president and I was vice president. We affirmed as a board, we believed in the renaming effort, which had been started before we were on the board by Matt Haney, who is currently now serving as a state legislator. He was the original author of the resolution, and the board, before we got on the board, they were the one who approved it. We affirmed it, and then we said, but we can't work on this, so we're going to put this work on pause in order to reopen schools. What I saw, though, was that the New York Times, and then, talk about, right-wing media, you have the National Review, Breitbart, InfoWars, basically, as we see in other areas, just this kind of constant drumbeat saying that we were focused on renaming, and that wasn't actually the case.
Gary Camilla's article in The Atlantic, which I found very interesting because The Atlantic is known as a highly esteemed and respected magazine. And I looked up Gary Camilla, who wrote about the recall for The Atlantic. I found out that Camilla actually, he either left or was fired by the Chronicle, it's hard to say, for the way he was writing about Italian Americans. Now, he defends his approach to writing about Italian Americans, and I just recommend people go to his website to find out more about that. I think that he makes good points on the website, but he's one of these sort of like pro quote unquote free speech proponents. And I've just found out that many Atlantic authors and journalists are affiliated with Koch-funded foundations. We're going to talk about the Koch donor network. Here's what The Atlantic wrote. San Francisco's recall campaign drew national attention because it was seen as a trial of racialized left-wing politics. What does it mean that voters in one of the most liberal cities in the country decisively repudiated a board that last academic year marched proudly under the banner of racial equity and social justice while making no effort to open its schools? And that is the narrative that a lot of people have heard. We know there were two folks, Autumn Luigen, is that the right pronunciation? I don't know.
I don't know how to pronounce her name. Yeah, okay. She was one of the recallers, and she moved to our city and then filed the recall 2 months after moving.
I know. So, and then
really interesting facts.
Right. And her partner were both on, I believe Fox News. They were on right-wing media outlets and saying that they were Democrats and liberals, and at the same time sort of just, channeling everything into this recall campaign with this narrative that there was no effort to open the schools.
Right.
And go ahead.
I want to add, I don't think their children ever attended SFUSD schools.
I know. That's another thing that I was reading about. So this is interesting because I think this is part of what we're seeing with a lot of these school board takeovers and sort of community level takeovers of politics and school boards and school commissions is that people are coming from the outside to lead these campaigns. Just want to give you, before we go to a break, a couple of minutes to talk about, there were also, people brought up comments that you made about the Chinese community in 2016 around, I believe, the election of Donald Trump. And I went back and read your comments, and as a Chinese person who is for social and racial justice, and you had support from Chinese people too, I thought, well, that, I don't disagree with your comments, but I know that they could be seen as inflammatory. And then you have said in the past that they came up at a really interesting time, and they were brought up by someone who's very interesting too. Mm-hmm. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think what we learn more and more is you have to, go to the source and see why these stories are being, when things become an outrage story, what you find is there's people that are usually driving those narratives. And so the woman who originally went looking for tweets that I had made in 2016 when I was a parent, and my child was reporting that kids were being bullied, specifically Black and Latinx children were being bullied. They were listening to, racialized teasing at their school by Asian Americans. At the time, I said, we need to do a better job of educating all kids so that, we don't have bullying in our schools. And but the woman who actually went looking for those tweets works for the Manhattan Institute.
Yeah.
And that is a New York think tank. They're promoting policing, broken windows style policing, and Chris Rufo, if folks are aware, his name is getting more people are aware of him. He's the one who invented the critical race theory, political, weapon.
Strategy,
really.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so he's the senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute. And they are using these narratives in San Francisco and New York, places where there are large numbers of Asian Americans and maybe more blue states, places where they can't run Christian nationalist agendas. They are using these types of narratives to create conflict between Asian American and Black communities. And Diane Yap is writing articles saying that white people are not responsible for targeting Asian Americans, and it's really Black folks. It's the Black community that's responsible for the rise in the anti-Asian hate. And so, using these, it's really disinformation because the data does not support that, but they're using these narratives to advocate for more policing in both San Francisco and New York, where they wouldn't be able to push these Christian nationalist narratives.
Yeah. And this recall actually involved 2 other school commissioners besides yourself, and then the same groups of people, and including Scott Wiener, actually a Democrat, who was running a PAC that was being funded by right-wing billionaires, which I find interesting. He's a big YIMBY proponent. We're also funding the recall of the progressive DA in San Francisco.
Chesa Boudin, yes.
Chesa
and
Boudin.
I do think the school board kind of was caught up in a campaign that started the day that he was elected.
Yeah.
They started their recall of Chesa Boudin because, people were against, progressive reform of police department.
Yeah. So, and we're going to talk a little bit more about how Chinese people in particular and Asians can be used as a wedge population, because sometimes Chinese people, and I know this from experience, can be quite conservative and sometimes a little bit racist as well. And I'm saying that as a Chinese American person with a Chinese American family in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I think it's important. These are really difficult conversations to have, but they're important to have. And I think the last point that we can make here is that there was a dispute about the Lowell School, which has been predominantly white and Asian. It was a merit-based school, and the school board voted to make it just a lottery system school, which would then bring in more children of other ethnicities into the school, which is a very prestigious school. So just real quickly, I think it's even illegal in California, supposedly, to have a merit-based system like that in a public school. Do you want to comment on that? We've got about a minute before the break.
So just really quickly, Lowell High School is a comprehensive high school. So I've been told by legal at SFUSD that it's not legal to actually have academic requirements for a school like that. The reason we did it, like many schools during the pandemic, is we couldn't implement a test-based system when we weren't doing testing. But I also want to add, the framing was that it was going to let more Black and Latinx kids in. What we saw that was that Latinx kids benefited the most, but it was predominantly immigrant students. So it also benefited Chinese, low-income immigrant students were more benefited, as well as students with disabilities, because testing, is a barrier for low-income communities that are English learner communities, as well as students with disabilities. But it would just diversify the school, and it made it much more diverse than it had been in 20 years.
And we can talk a little bit more about the effort to make it a merit-based school again. Right after this really quick break, I just want to let everyone know and remind you that you are listening to KSQD 90.7 FM in the Santa Cruz and Monterey Bay areas, and now throughout the Central Coast and Prudendale at KSQT at 89.7 FM and 89.5 FM on the FM dial. We are talking to Christina Johnson, who is a parent in Temecula, California, where Moms for Liberty has, I believe, kind of taken over the school board. We're going to go, and also Ali Collins, who was one of the school board members in San Francisco, who was targeted for recall by actually outsiders who had just moved to San Francisco. And then there was this whole campaign to get everybody on board by the far right, which poured millions of dollars into the recall. We've had a similar recall here in Santa Cruz, California, of progressive people on the city council. We're not going to get into that. That would take another 5 days or so to talk about. But Christina, what happened when Moms for Liberty took over the school board? Can you kind of walk us through?
I'm your average local mom. I actually moved up to Temecula from San Diego County in 2012 for the schools. Love San Diego County, but I wanted slightly better schools for the kids, wanted a place where they could set their roots. As you said before, I didn't have that. And we've been here for over 10 years and have really enjoyed our time here. So it has, I know traditionally it's been a conservative area, but not like this. There was a school board takeover, and it was initiated by a local church, a specific pastor that is very aggressive when it comes to politics. And it started with COVID, like many things, the mask mandates specifically. His church was very upset about that, very loud about it. And they were campaigning to get people to outright defy the different orders coming out. When he didn't get his way, he kind of made it his personal vendetta to see how much he could take over and raised the funds. The church raised the campaign funds for the seat members that are now on the school board. They are members of the congregation. This congregation has had Marjorie Taylor Greene come out to speak here. They sent people to January 6th. In fact, they sent a video shout out to their pastor from January 6th. So it is a very, very, they are not the majority, but they're very loud. They snuck in undetected, silent but deadly, as I said before. I don't know how much I can say on here, but they were not loud and proud about their agenda until they were elected. And it was a low turnout election. People didn't realize what was at risk, and that's how they got in.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think that the election that was held to recall Ali Collins also was a low turnout election, something like 25% of the electorate turned out for that. And so that's the same thing that happened, I guess, in Temecula. So how many school board members now are, quote unquote, Moms for Liberty?
So we have more directly in my immediate district, Jen Wasserma is the main person who is also a member of Moms for Liberty. We have Dr. Komrosky and Gonzalez, who are obviously not directly members of Moms for Liberty themselves, but they are affiliates in terms of Three Percenters, Proud Boys, etc. They are all kind of in that group together, attending the same church, hosting the same events, inviting big player names in the conservative circles to come speak. Just very, very active. In fact, the first thing they did once they did win was they called a meeting and voted to get rid of CRT. And I'm doing my air quotes because no one can actually say what that is still, right?
Yeah.
But that was the first thing that they did. And that's when alarm bells started going off for everyone who didn't realize that that's who came in. Mm-hmm. And ever since, it's been a push from the parents and the teachers and the students. And it's just been a propaganda machine. They are very organized, and they have a lot of clout. The pastor who is backing them is also the chaplain for the local police force.
And what is his name?
It's Tim. Oh gosh, I'm always. I hate. There we go, Tim Thompson. There we go. I try not to use the names on my social media because I don't want any litigation.
I see.
Right. But yeah, Tim Thompson, and he has a podcast, again, very, very loud and proud. He's known for harassing teachers at the elementary schools, calling people out for their gender identity or orientation. They had a drama teacher at the high school kicked out for their sexual identity, as well as they didn't like some of the Shakespeare plays. Just, yeah, very, very, they spend a lot of time finding people and putting people up to produce a story and a narrative. As one of the parents of color, right now, as it stands, if you go to one of the school board meetings, the first thing they'll say is that we are not allowed to speak, specifically the Black, brown parents. And if we so much as utter something, we are ousted, usually followed out into the parking lot by one of the people in there who feels it's an opportunity to either follow you or approach you physically.
Wait. What? So you're saying that the school board actually announces that you're not allowed?
Yes. That's specifically Dr. Komrosky, who will open the meeting by stating very clearly that he will kick out the parents that are speaking out. But it's very clear it's at us.
I see.
And we are the ones who get ousted for so much as just presenting to pose a question or wanting to say something. We're not allowed to speak. We are ousted. And instead, they bring up congregation members and have congregation members pose as parents with students in the schools when they do not have students in any of the schools currently. Or have someone posing as a teacher. I think one of the more recent meetings, they had a congregation member come up and say that they were so upset that they're not allowed to preach in the classroom without someone saying something, and we need to get government out of the school so he can preach, and he's not even a teacher.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, it's very similar to what happened with the SCOTUS ruling on the discrimination with businesses, and how that case, the couple, it was made up, wasn't even real,
right,
but made it all the way to SCOTUS, and now we have this decision. So they follow that same playbook of, we're going to put it out there, and then we're going to say this is what the people want. And their efforts have ramped up.
This is just so interesting, and I've been watching Temecula on social media. It looks like chaos a lot of the time at the school board meetings. Yeah. And I just want to refer people, if you don't know who Moms for Liberty is, let's back up for a second. I call them Moms for Lunacy. The group was founded in Florida in 2020. It started as sort of an anti-mask campaign, but the founders are very much affiliated with the Republican Party. They now, according to this Vice article from April of 2023, which I recommend everyone read, a far-right moms group is terrorizing schools. That's the name of the article. They now have 260 chapters at least. This was from April. They claim to be a grassroots group, and I know you both can talk about this. We'll probably get there after the break. But they are not, they're an AstroTurf group because they are being so heavily funded by the octopus of funding and other right-wing billionaire foundations and groups and nonprofits and et cetera that are funding all kinds of groups across the United States. And they're leading the charge on book banning campaigns across the country. And the group says it helped install 275 of its favored candidates on school boards in 2022 alone. And according to Vice News, who interviewed students, administrators, parents, superintendents across the country, their stories paint a picture of a group that conducts orchestrated harassment campaigns against individuals that's resulted in many fearing for their safety and in some cases their lives. The greatest impact that Moms for Liberty is having is imparting fear within teachers and educators and in the parents, according to Laura Lee Abbey, co-founder of Defense of Democracy, which is one of the groups that's been organized to fight against the influence of Moms for Liberty on school boards. So these are the folks who are calling LGBTQ plus folks groomers and pedophiles. And really that is, as far as I'm concerned, a kind of genocidal speak. You know, you're encouraging stochastic terrorism with that kind of talk. And I know Allie has some things to say about what's been happening in Glendale, so we're going to get to that. But Christina, you talked about the harassment that's happened to people, activists in Temecula. What has happened? And like apparently there's an affiliation with Proud Boys. I think you mentioned that.
Yes. Yeah. So on a nationwide scale, if you look into it, a lot of the wives of Proud Boys are Moms for Liberty and vice versa.
Okay.
So they are connected to each other in a very interesting way. But there has been attacks on fellow activists, and I'm one of the more lucky ones, I should say, where I've only more recently become a target for them, where they're starting to spread my social media posts and talk about me. But I've had friends where their personal bank accounts were hacked, their personal homes were vandalized. One of my friends, Jen Reeves, her home was vandalized on Easter Sunday, red paint on her garage and her cars. My friend Brandy had her business accounts hacked into. My friend Rachel, who is actually a pastor at another local church here that's very diverse and inclusive, has been pushed into the street, into traffic by a grown man. People asking her, where do you work? I've gotten that sort of question too. Questions wanting to locate where they can come and find you or where they can, bother your boss sort of thing. I've had friends that after they were kicked out of a meeting for wanting to speak up and then not being allowed to speak up, other parents would follow them into the parking lot. And even when a sheriff would be there and saying, sir, go back inside. They're leaving. Just go mind your business. The man did not want to leave them alone. He was threatening physical violence and claiming that it was because he could have sworn they said something about his wife, which wasn't true, but he wouldn't even leave when the cops told him to leave. So they've sent unalive threats to students, other parents of gay or trans children. We had a girl who won prom queen who is a trans girl. I hate having to say that. And they lost their minds. They were campaigning against it. The TV USD school board members were reaching out with their usual inflammatory rhetoric. How do the real women feel about this? How do the mothers feel about this? And meanwhile, the kids, they voted. That was their prom queen. Right. It had nothing to do with us, but they made it a thing. And there are parents who are afraid to even speak up on social media because they've already gotten threats from these groups telling them, don't even say anything. Don't come to meetings. Don't. Or we're coming for you.
Oh my God. Okay. Wow.
Yes.
So, we have to cut to a quick break, but right after this break, we're going to talk about what's happening nationally and also what has happened here in Santa Cruz County that we should maybe be keeping an eye on. We have a statement from our county superintendent of schools as well that was provided to us for the show. We will be right back with Christina Johnson and Allie Collins talking about Moms for Liberty and other right-wing groups being funded by right-wing billionaires across the country. Welcome back to Talk of the Bay. This is your host for today, Ami Chen Mills. I am on the line with Christina Johnson, who is a parent in Temecula, California, which is fighting off the Moms for Liberty group, which is an anti-LGBTQ plus group that has also been leading the charge on book bans, including book bans of books by people of color, about people of color, about gay couples, about it's been, if you haven't been paying attention, it's time to start paying attention. I just want to quote from Newsweek, and folks who've been paying attention to social media and tracking Moms for Liberty probably know this already, but the Indiana Hamilton County chapter of Moms for Liberty, a national right-wing parents group that opposes the teaching of LGBTQ plus issues or America's history of racism, used a quote from one of the most infamous dictators in global history near the top of its most recent newsletter. This quote is from a 1935 rally, and it appeared in the newsletter like this: "He alone who owns the youth gains the future." Guess who said that? That was Adolf Hitler. So this is one of their role models, apparently. You're listening to KSQD 90.7 in Santa Cruz and throughout the Central Coast. Allie Collins, you were talking about Glendale. I saw you actually on TikTok today and what's happening there. You posted some videos, and I just want to get the scoop on what you're seeing in Glendale. Is in the middle of LA, as far as I know. I mean, it's remarkable that this is happening there.
Yeah, I'm from Los Angeles originally, and I grew up in Silver Lake, for people who know, and Glendale's right over. We used to go to the mall in the 80s and go shopping, and to hear that they're the center of this firestorm where Proud Boys are showing up in the center of LA County is just kind of crazy. And But at the same time, in the past 2 years, when you're in the center of an attack, you don't really know what's going on. I started talking to researchers, talking to other parents, started following news stories, and then you start to see these patterns evolve, and talking with folks in Loudoun County, Virginia, and then you see the patterns in upstate New York and then Florida. That's why I actually reached out to Temecula parents, because I saw these similar patterns. And what we see is this pattern of targeting that was described, where they use these really scary people like Andy Ngo, Tony Moon, Jack Posobiec. These are folks that, if anybody follows this stuff, they come up with these conspiracy theories, this idea that it's Antifa, BLM, those folks that are on social media. Their role is amplifying outrage and directing it at their targets. And what I learned was that I was the target of Andy Ngo, a man who lives in Oregon, and Jack Posobiec, the guy who came up with the QAnon, conspiracy, was tweeting about me 2 days after my story, quote, broke. And then to see them involved in Glendale, they're not even from California, and they're not even parents, right? Why are they talking about school board politics?
Right.
When most parents don't even care. Most parents don't even care about school boards. So the fact that you have these men that are associated with violence, the insurrection, they're always associated with the Proud Boys and, things like that. Why are they tweeting about school board policies? And what I saw was this pattern of, Andy Ngo would tweet and promote, videos of really violent interactions between people. It got violent down in Glendale. And then you'd see somebody in Temecula saying, "Watch out, Temecula," with the tweet that Andy Ngo was using. And I'm even hearing from folks in Chula Vista that there's somebody, a parent who's being targeted, and the local person, who's aggrieved, is calling in Andy Ngo. And so in a sense, they're being used as weapons of fear. And even if they don't physically show up, we are very vulnerable as parents. I can speak up, but when people start talking about where your kids go to school, and that's what they do, they will start talking about where your children go to school, what their names are. You have a responsibility to protect your children. And so especially also students that are trans, they can't openly speak up. In Chino, I'm hearing that, students are scared to speak up on their own behalf at school board meetings because they're worried that they'll be targeted.
So, let's talk about what is behind all of this. I often get the sense in looking at all of this that it's less about actual, they are ginning up fear around trans people and gay people and Antifa and BLM. But really, you have these people like David Sachs, who I understand was involved in funding your recall campaign or the recalls in San Francisco. Harmeet Dillon was hired to represent, I guess, folks who wanted Lowell to go back to a merit-based system. Chris Rufo, you've talked about, and we've got the Koch brothers, we've got the Wilkses. I do want to point people to a video called "Why Is There So Much Right-Wing Media?" At the Second Thought YouTube channel, which is an amazing video about how a lot of this money is fossil fuel money. And money from billionaires who really want to keep their sort of like money-making playground wide open for them, right? With no restrictions. Can you, either one of you actually, let's actually go to Christina really quickly. Do you have any thoughts on this? I don't know if you've been looking into this, but, and then we'll go to Allison about what is the network behind all of this? What is the overarching goal?
Oh boy, I think Allie can probably put it most eloquently, but I would say just out of my upbringing and my involvement with this type of community growing up,
right?
That
because you were in the church, in the conservative church.
Absolutely, yes. And I'm still, getting over things, and it really is population control. It's complete control over the status quo system. Everyone is too free. And I really think that at the end of the day, they're trying to reel things back, club us over the head, drag us back into the caves of yesteryear, where women are latched to a stove with a baby on the hip and no options and nowhere to go. Minorities or LGBTQI plus community members are in fear of their lives and staying quiet and hidden and easily taken advantage of or used. We've got these, child labor laws going in, and I know that's not related to education per se, but in some states they are already trying to make youth work a requirement for public schools so that they can just keep feeding minors into the work system, underpay them, not cover them with workers' comp. So, I really think you said it when you said these billionaires are trying to keep everything the way it is. That's exactly it. And right now, things are moving forward. They're progressing. People are stepping away. The rose-colored shades have been removed. We realize that a lot of what we've been dealing with is a scam. We're wasting our lives so a few people can get rich at the top, and they're trying to rein that all back. And this is the best way to do it. You infuse theology and politics and fear mongering and rage and give it to people who are hungry for it, who are looking for a place to point their attention and their rage and are willing to put their own lives on the line almost to fight for these principles that they believe are American values. And in reality, it's all just churning up money, going up the ladder to the same old folks at the expense of our safety and our education.
And I know Allie has a lot to say about this as well. We have Allie Collins, who was one of the people who was recalled by, within a campaign which included millions of dollars from far-right billionaires. We're talking about the network of right-wing money that's coming into even blue school districts and blue counties and blue states and Glendale, California, of all places, with this anti-LGBTQ message, and with the threat of violence. Really. Allie, what do you want to say about what you see about this network and what they're all about?
Well, I guess you just have to ask yourself who benefits from all this chaos and disruption and violence, right? School boards have always been, people disagree on education policy. And even in San Francisco, we've had in the past school boards that argued about how we should spend money in our schools, what our priorities should be. But when you have this kind of violence, anybody who cares about kids is not going to invite Proud Boys to school board meetings. They're not going to invite people that are associated with violence. And ultimately, as adults, it's our job to make sure that kids are safe when we disagree. We want to disagree in a way that models how you handle conflict. What we're seeing right now, is not productive in any way, shape, or form. And so anyone that says that they care about kids, this is not how you go about it, by making children afraid or making parents fearful of participating in their, in the governance of their schools. Yeah. So the only real reason that anybody would do this is because they want to dismantle our public education system.
That's
and
right.
I think they've been very clear about this. Betsy DeVos has said, all of them, Steve Bannon, they've said they want to dismantle the Department of Education. And what that means is they want people to basically, make education kind of a public, it's not a public good, but it's something that you have to pay for. And they want to monetize the education system either through charter schools. Homeschooling is a big one. You'll see a lot of the same people that promote this anti-CRT or school indoctrination rhetoric are then telling people that they should homeschool their kids and then they can get their education from PragerU, right? So it's this...
Which is also funded by the Koch brothers and others of that
exactly.
ilk. Yeah.
So you have that. And I also want to say, a lot of this is driven by the right wing, Moms for Liberty, all of them popped up all over the place. And there was a local parent who did research and found out that a man named Chris Marsden, who's a GOP lawyer, he was propping up a whole bunch of them. So it's not organic activity. It's like producing widgets, right? He was also responsible for Friends of Lowell, which is the organization that targeted me. And the goal is to, but it also, I want to say, it's, it can also be libertarians and neoliberal Democrats who are just interested in making money. And so I think we've also seen in the Bay Area, the tech sector, there's opportunities to monetize education through tech, tech-centered, solutions to education, right? And then there's also real estate. In San Francisco, a large investor, you had charter schools invested in the San Francisco recall, and you also had the California Realtor organization.
That's right. So, I saw that. I was like, oh, that's interesting. The California Realtors Association and Apartment Association were behind the recall. And also, I believe of the DA up there, they were also behind the recall of our progressive council members here in Santa Cruz, California.
Yeah. And in San Francisco, one of the largest landowners is SFUSD. So, what you see across the country is a kind of, and in Oakland, even there were arguments around closing schools. And then they'll say, oh, well, what are we going to do with this real estate? Right. So, you have to look at who's behind this, who benefits from this. And it isn't necessarily one person. Obviously, pastors that have, churches, they benefit if they can get people into their pews and if they can, fund private schools with, tax dollars. So there's a variety of folks that benefit from this, and also, political parties as well, politicians on all sides, but specifically those from the right wing.
I need to take a little station break here and tell you that you are listening to KSQD at 90.7 FM in Santa Cruz, and now happily throughout the Central Coast. I hope you're listening to us from Prunedale or from Salinas or from any of our new areas where listeners can tune in. Down there, it's KSQT at 89.7 FM and also 89.5 FM. On the dial, we are all over the place, bringing you corporate-free news and music and all kinds of good, wonderful local programming. We are currently talking to Allie Collins, who was a target of right-wing billionaire-funded recall, a right-wing billionaire-funded recall in San Francisco, which you may have heard about, and Christina Johnson, who is a single mother of 3 in the Temecula school district, where Moms for Liberty has gained some leverage. And, there's so much to talk about. I do have to read a statement from our superintendent about what's happening here. We're going to talk about what to do. I know, Allie, you're interested in talking about affirmative action issues. And you sent me a very interesting paper called CFER and the Backlash to Equity. This is an organization called Californians for Equal Rights And this paper is titled as a subtitle, "And the Backlash to Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Ethnic Studies" by Tom Scott from April the 8th of 2023. This is, unfortunately, as far as I'm concerned, led by actually a lot of Chinese people. I believe mostly Chinese people. Who was that person that you have brought up a few times? Is it Ed
Bloom.
Ed Bloom, who's with the
Federalist Society, and he's responsible for stacking the courts and SCOTUS.
Is he with the Manhattan Institute too, or is that some?
No, that's Chris Rufo. But yeah, the Federalist Society is the one that is responsible for this conservative court that we have. Okay. And he's not a lawyer, but he matches plaintiffs with conservative lawyers to file lawsuits to then dismantle protections.
Right. And this group, Californians for Equal Rights, is basically on a mission to, quote, stop ethnic studies, unquote, in their own words. And according to this paper by Tom Scott, is fundamentally anti-democratic, authoritarian, racist, and anti-LGBTQ+. And these groups use phrases like equality, parental rights. We have Moms for Liberty, which I substitute with lunacy a lot of the time, because it's not liberty when you can't be a gay child in a school or a trans child or parents of such, or be a person of color and not have your history taught, not have your identity affirmed and included. That's not freedom. That's something entirely different. So, Allie, do you want to talk a little bit about what you're seeing on the national horizon with this anti-affirmative action ruling from the Supreme Court? And, I'm concerned about how Chinese people are being used as a wedge in a lot of these political conflicts right now. And I'm hoping we're going to tip to this, what I'm going to call the side of human rights, equality, and true freedom.
Well, yeah, thanks. I think what I've been following this for a while, because Lowell High School was one of the schools that was involved in supporting the dismantling of affirmative action, along with Loudoun and Fairfax County school called Thomas Jefferson High School. So we had local folks that were connected with Ed Bloom and showed up on the court steps to support him in dismantling affirmative action. That is basically now going to be a wedge for them to now go after any programs that are needing to rebalance the scale when it comes to equity. And their slogan is equality, not equity. So this idea of just treat everybody the same. It's this race blind kind of view that they're using. And unfortunately, this organization started for Prop 16 in order to defeat Prop 16. There's connections with Ward Connolly. Chris Rufo is an advisor.
And wait, who's Ward Connolly? Because everyone doesn't know.
He's involved. He was the one who pushed Prop 209, which made it illegal for California schools to consider race as a part of their admission, and it's made it harder for schools in the UC system to consider race as one of many factors in their enrollment. And so they basically went forward, and now they're literally now already targeting. They are suing San Francisco City for subsidies or support that the city provides to trans people of color. There's a lawsuit. If you go on their website, they're very proud of their lawsuits. They threatened San Diego High School District and prevented them from implementing a resolution to address hate speech under the guise of free speech. And they're targeting another school district, trying to impede their ability to implement ethnic studies, which was approved already at the state level. So what we're seeing is that in red states, they rewrote the state laws, but in blue states, what they're doing is they're using the law to target protections. And they're going after these small districts with these school takeovers. And in effect, they're trying to undermine what California voters, we've already voted for.
Right.
The state legislature already put these laws in place, like the FAIR Act mandates that we teach LGBTQ studies. That was 10 years ago. Okay, it's not news. And so now we're seeing, though, in Chino, in Temecula, and in other districts, these Moms for Liberty school board members are refusing to implement what we've already voted on.
Yeah. And so this is the Californians for Equal Rights organization, something to track, something to be following. We do have emails that have come in, and I want to talk a little bit about what we can do and what's happening here in Santa Cruz County. And I didn't go all the way out to the Central Coast, but at least in Santa Cruz County, there are a few things that have happened here. We had a noose that was hung on some kind of a lamppost downtown. There was a party that was thrown for Adolf Hitler at UCSC without an adequate response in the minds of many Jewish people from the UC administration. There was a chalking at a local church that has two gay spiritual leaders. One's a rabbi and one's a pastor. And the chalking was the words were Satan masks himself as an angel of light. This was in front of the driveway or on the driveway to the church. The comments in the Santa Cruz Sentinel that I've seen around the name change of Cabrillo and anything having to do with race issues have been straight up Nazi. I mean, like talking about the Jewish global conspiracy, being threatening, being physically threatening. That happened to me in comments to the point where the Sentinel has now disabled comments entirely. That's our local daily paper. We've had swastikas painted, up at the UCSC and a bunch of other things. So we also had a huge anti-mask, well, not huge, but we had a contingent of anti-mask folks who got very upset. And we had a statement from the superintendent back then saying that we've been dismayed. This is from 2022. This is Dr. Ferris Saba, our county superintendent of schools. We've been dismayed to witness as teachers and staff in our county have been cursed at by parents while children are present over disagreements around COVID-19 mitigation policies. We've seen behavior ranging from uncivil to toxic and even fear-inducing, including in October when a group of otherwise peaceful demonstrators made the unfortunate decision to trespass in our office space in search of board members to confront, Zoom bombs, disrupting staff, etc. Now, Ferris Saba also wrote today for this program that, sadly, we live in a moment where some across our nation are pushing to silence and censor LGBTQIA voices from our classrooms and libraries. These alarming incidents only redouble our commitment to creating inclusive spaces. Fortunately, we have not seen an issue of this kind here in Santa Cruz County. Instead, our school community understands that our diversity is our strength, something to be celebrated and not brushed under the rug. I do think we need to, and then there's like a whole thing about, making sure we have LGBTQIA themed books for all of our schools. The questions that we have coming in have to do with how can we help inform parents and students about what's going on? What can community members do to remove these far-right school board members? So a couple of questions for you all. I just want to note, though, that Moms for Liberty shows chapters on its website. They could be quite small. I don't know, in San Mateo County, in Santa Clara County, which is adjacent to our county, in San Luis Obispo County, in Santa Barbara County. So they are definitely not far, far away. And what do you guys have to say? Let's start with Christina about what can be done to prevent or to remove these far-right school board members, and how do we inform others? What would you suggest, given your experience?
Awesome. I was going to say, let Allie take this home because I know she'll wrap it up nicely. My biggest thing that I like to say is it's difficult, right? Not everyone can always get out, especially if you're in an area where there's already threats happening. And what we really need and what everyone can do is to engage with the teachers, with the staff, with the students to respond. Like when you get emails regarding the curriculum, we got them in Temecula recently when the school board was withholding the history curriculum over the mention of Harvey Milk, and the teachers themselves were initiating and reaching out to parents and saying, we need your help. And I realized that most of the reasonable parents, we trust the teachers to make the right decisions. So when we see those emails, those announcements, we think they've got it. They know what they're doing. I trust the teacher. And what we aren't realizing are the small but loud groups of people who have made it their life's mission to defund the schools and put everyone back in closets. They're the ones responding. And that's what's going on the record.
Okay, so we need to be more engaged. We need to be watching our school board board elections wherever they are.
Yes.
And because people aren't announcing that they're moms for liberty or far right. Allie, you have about 2 minutes to take us home, as Christina said. What can we do? What should we be doing?
I just say pay attention. We have folks who are showing up from other states that aren't parents. So if you're a local, start going to school board meetings. You don't have to have kids in the school district. Show up at school board meetings. And in some ways, you can show up and, if you don't have kids in the school system, then you're safer than maybe, a parent who has a trans kid. And offer to speak for them. That's something that you can do. Also, pay attention to what's going on in the, I'm showing up and trying to help where I can with Temecula and Glendale. Sometimes it takes somebody outside of your system to be able to speak up on your behalf. And we're all one state, right? We are not Florida, and we're proud of our values. And, these aren't new things that we've been doing. Ethnic studies, supporting LGBTQIA students, right? So pay attention. We need to support Tony Thurmond. We need to support our governor, and we need to encourage our elected leaders at the state level to support some of these smaller districts where these, issues are going on. And if you're a writer, if you can do research, there's always ways that you can support, find out who's active, and there's always a way that you can help, even if you can't physically show up or, you can't, you're concerned about your safety. There's ways people can write letters.
Yeah.
And support each other that way.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Allie Collins. Thank you so much, Christina Johnson, two very engaged and wonderful activists fighting against what I see as a fascist threat on our school boards and across our country. There's also the organization Defense of Democracy. You can find Allie all over the internet, Allie Collins at Medium. She also has a website. Christina is on TikTok. One of my favorite, I feel like if we all actually started becoming active in great numbers, we wouldn't be seeing a fascist threat. It just wouldn't be able to take off at all. So here's my favorite quote. If we don't use our democracy, we lose our democracy. Thank you so much for joining us today on KSQD.
Thank you so much. And also for folks who want to know, I have a podcast people can check out on YouTube and learn more about all these issues.
And it's called
Just Talks Podcast, and I interview all these experts and they explain it all.
Okay, great. And I want to thank Nyasu, our sound engineer for today, Howard Feldstein, who is our intrepid program manager here at KSQD. Thank you all for listening, and I'll be back at you some other time, hopefully on Talk of the Bay or elsewhere.